Hey, good morning, and welcome to SportsBeat Live, where the coverage team of the Chiefs, Kansas City Stars Chiefs coverage team, brings you their thoughts on the Chiefs, the news developments, the next game, the previous game. And before I introduce the panel, I just want to say that, a year ago when we were having these meetings on weekday mornings, we would all have to drive from different parts of the metro area and to arrive at a tire store in a different part of the metro area every week. And we had less trouble getting together on those days than we do meeting this way, virtually on Thursday or Friday morning. So that's where things stand, and that partially explains why we're not here all together. Herbie Teope, the Chiefs beat writer, will hopefully, fingers crossed, will join us here in just a few minutes. But we have an outstanding group, starting with Sam Mcdowell. How you doing, Sam?
Blair, I don't think we all had to drive. I think there were about 5 times where you could just walk to the location.
That was true. Yeah, and I remember the one time it was near your house. You couldn't be there that day. So Vahe Gregorian is here. Good morning, Vahe.
Blair, good morning. Without Herbie here, I feel very conspicuous being the only non-Sam on that right panel. But I do want it known that my grandfather on my father's side was Samuel. So there's that.
There is that. Got that going for us. Sam Mellinger, how you doing, Sam?
I'm good. And as it happens, there's a Samuel downstairs trying to work through a first grade project right now. So if I get interrupted, hopefully it's not while we're talking about Le'Veon Bell.
That also didn't happen at the tire store last year.
That's right.
But that's fine. Hey, we are going to get to Le'Veon Bell. That's the big news, of course, for the Chiefs. But before we do, let's start where we usually do and talk about the injuries that one of the reasons that we're doing this on Friday and not on Thursday, our typical Thursday, is because we wanted to get an injury report. And the first one for the week came out yesterday afternoon, and it shows 3 Chiefs that did not practice. And Sam McDowell, I'm going to turn to you on this. One of them, pretty obvious, Kelechi Osemele, he's probably out for the season with the knee injuries. Injured both of his knees on the first series against the Raiders last week. But the other one that I think is really significant is Sammy Watkins with the hamstring injury. And let's just talk quickly about what he means to the offense, and if he can't go, how that impacts the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think Sammy Watkins has found his role in this offense to sort of being the underneath guy when we see defenses try to take away the over top. He's been smart enough to pick his spots, to realize what's going to be open. He's sort of been that safety valve for Patrick Mahomes this year. I'd be surprised if we saw Sammy Watkins play. We've seen him go through some hamstring injuries before. Usually it costs him 2-3 weeks. Osemele is going to be out for the season. One of those injuries is bad enough to put him out for the season. Having both of them, if that guy comes back and plays football again, it'll be a great comeback story. But then, Hitchens missed practice because of an illness yesterday. We'll find out today shortly if he's back. And then obviously Anthony Sherman's out too because he's on the COVID list. So they've got a few things they're dealing with right now.
And let's qualify. Hitchens is not on the COVID list. That was
correct.
You make Andy Reid, who announces the injuries, make sure to provide that qualifier. And I guess that's important these days, right? To make sure that just to define what the illness is or what it isn't. But getting back to Sammy Watkins, here's a guy who has basically he's a number 1 or number 2 type receiver playing a number 3 receiver role for the Chiefs, and that just means others are going to have to step up. I think Nicole Hardman is the player we're looking at that needs to really rise to the occasion. And it's not like he hasn't been asked to do this before, right? He was, his status was elevated last year when Watkins missed a few games, and Tyreek Hill even missed a couple of games last year with injuries, and Hardman was the guy. But I don't know. I think Sammy Watkins is pretty important to what the Chiefs want to do with this offense, and he's just He's just sort of been a blue collar sort of wide receiver for the Chiefs. He can get into the end zone and does get into the end zone, but he doesn't have the Tyreek Hill, Nicole Hardman sort of flash and speed. And, Kelsey, of course, is the favorite target. But I think one of the things that helps put the Chiefs offense over the top is Sammy Watkins and just his just all around steadiness. I just think the Chiefs are going to miss that.
They've got a deep receiving core, Blair, but I don't think that those other guys that we're mentioning do what Sammy Watkins does. Nicole Hardman certainly is not a like-for-like replacement with Sammy Watkins, and neither is Demarcus Robinson. And those are the two guys that are going to get elevated snaps. So to your point, they're going to miss Sammy Watkins while he's out. There's stats that show, and Sam mentioned this last week, that they're significantly better when Sammy Watkins is on the field, and that's not a coincidence. It's because of the role he plays within this offense.
He does things that like the other guys don't do, right? Like I think he's their best downfield blocker, in that group. He's a really good route runner. And you guys have been mentioning he does the intermediate stuff, the underneath stuff, but he's also, you still have to respect him deep. I mean, he's not Tyreek, he's not Mccole Hardman with speed, but we've seen him go deep. We've seen him, on some go routes and that kind of thing. I mean, they're going to have to change the plays that they call on, I was going to say Sunday, on Monday, are going to be different without Sammy Watkins than they would be if he was playing. It's not tragic, right? Like there's a lot of teams that would love to have these problems, but there are some things that the Chiefs will have to do differently.
Yeah. Remember, he had the 60-yard reception, right? It was the AFC, the finishing touch on the AFC Championship game last year. So.
Yeah. What an interesting career.
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, I always think about him of just being like this bona fide, like no doubt about it star coming out of Clemson in the draft. And speed was like one of his many qualities, and it just didn't work out for him in Buffalo. He has this weird time in LA, and now he's here and he's like this complimentary guy to this, 5th round receiver in Tyreek Hill and a 3rd round tight end in Travis Kelce. It's just, but he's gone from that star, like expected, superstar receiver to this, very complimentary, kind of do the dirty work kind of guy. It's just a really interesting career he's had.
It took him a couple of years to be comfortable with that role too here. I mean, it's not just the fact that it was other stops that didn't utilize him that way. They didn't utilize him that way his first year here. They still viewed him as this potential 4-4 guy that could beat you over the top before. Like I said, I think really this year we've seen in the first month of the season, he's found his role better than he ever has here.
And one of those things with the complementary skills, just to sort of reiterate the points you guys are making, is that it's of the nature that makes those other guys better, right? Because he's so sort of solid at different aspects of the game that it opens everything else up in a different way. The other thing that's kind of interesting is he's kind of and what they'll miss without him is, right, he's one person who brings several things to the table that, like, DeMarcus doesn't quite, that Mccole Hardman doesn't quite. He's not as fast as Mccole, but he brings that all together, and that's the thing that's part of the deal here too. You just don't have something that is directly a replacement for it.
Yeah, Brian Johnson says Sammy runs such precise routes. I agree. I mean, and it is a lot of underneath stuff, and I don't have his stats in front of me, but he gets his share of 3rd down receptions that become 1st downs, and I absolutely believe the Chiefs are gonna miss that. So, okay, let's get to it. News of the day happened yesterday. I didn't get the exact time, but the Chiefs actually ended up tweeting it out sometime in the evening, did they not? With the signing of Le'Veon Bell, it was. A story that was building over the previous few days. It came down to what the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Chiefs. And this is a player that Brett Veach went out, identified as a must get, and they got him. And let's just talk about first why the Chiefs feel they need Le'Veon Bell. Sam Ellinger, I know you wrote about it this morning. Let's start with you. What's the big need here for the Chiefs?
Well, when they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they planned on him pairing with Damian Williams, and they planned on this being sort of a dynamic backfield with those two guys working together. Damian Williams opts out. This should go without saying, but good for him. God bless him for doing what he thinks is best for his family. But it leaves a hole in the backfield on the roster, and Darrell Williams, I think, has had like 4 carries since the opener, something like that. They don't trust Darwin Thompson. I think that's obvious. DeAndre Washington is maybe he can be something, but he's a practice squad guy that just got elevated. I mean, they needed that role. Herbie, reported before the season the Chiefs wanted Adrian Peterson and were pursuing him. So I thought that it was a no-brainer for them to pursue this guy. He's versatile. He catches a lot of balls. So he's a good fit that way. The one thing that I sort of, he's not a perfect fit. People say that like he catches passes, so he's a perfect fit, but he's not. That running style is super patient, legendarily patient.
Yeah.
And I don't know how good of a fit that is behind this run blocking offensive line. But he's good in pass protection. He can make some plays. He can be, I worry that like his name and who he was in 2014, people were like, oh, the Chiefs got, this incredible star running back. Well, I mean, he's averaged 3.3 yards per carry, and you can say what you want about the Jets, and it's probably true, but he's not the same guy as he was 5 years ago. But he's a significant, perhaps massive upgrade as a number 2 running back. He makes that offense better. And I also think that, I'm sorry, I'm talking too long, but he's a good runner, and they need good runners because that run game is kind of clogging up. Again, like the pass game is doing fine compared to most teams, but they need that run game to be better to sort of unlock what they have in that pass game. And Le'Veon Bell can help with that.
So go ahead, Vi.
Oh, no, I just say, first of all, that the best tweet I saw yesterday was Sam Mellinger urging people to read his column before the news shifted because it was an ever moving target. It got me to read it right away. I just follow up on Sam's point that I think no matter what, he's a proven presence, a veteran presence. But I do think Sam used the question in his column whether he's cooked. And I think it's a reasonable question, but weighed against the canvas of playing for the Jets, right? I mean, it's been between the year he sat out and then his first year with the Jets and this year, 2017, if I'm doing my math right, was the last time he was really playing regularly. And that year he was a 4-yard a carry guy. So I don't know that people should be expecting that he's going to somehow revitalize an offense that's already scoring 32 points a game. I mean, I think it's a good addition. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he fits in. But I don't think it's a reinvention of some sort. And maybe there's a little too much fuss on social media about the addition.
Yeah, to that point, and it's I kind of dug into the numbers last night for a story I'm writing today because I think that's the question: is what does Le'Veon Bell have left? And the advanced metrics really did not like this guy last year and don't like what he's done the first couple of weeks. And it takes into account the fact that the Jets had the second worst offensive line in football last year, according to some of these metrics. At least when it comes to run blocking, they were marginally better this year, but there's some stats that still take that stuff into account and says what they expect you to get on any given play based on the average running back. And last year alone, he got 99 fewer yards last year than what they said the average running back would have gotten on the exact same carries. So you can blame a lot of stuff on the Jets and their offensive line and that culture and whatnot, but Le'Veon Bell played a big part in his numbers as well last year. So you're not getting the guy that the Steelers got in 14, 15, and 16.
Yeah, or to the point that you're making too, Sam, you're not getting the guy that the Steelers didn't want to pay.
Right, yeah.
He's 28, he's not 38. He's 28, but God, the Steelers used the dog out. I mean, he had, I think, I looked this up. It was in the column. I think like 27 and a half touches per game his last 2 seasons there. I mean, they got their money's worth from him.
Yeah, he led the NFL. I think he had over 400 touches in 2017. So you're right. I mean, they used him everywhere. And what's funny is when you look at his skill set back then, it's the absolute perfect fit for what the Chiefs do now because he can line up in the slot. I mean, when the Chiefs go 5 wide, that you could send him out wide. But back to what Vahe said, the question is, what does he still have left? And I think that there's some serious doubt about exactly what he's got left.
Do you think a lot of the excitement is just because Chiefs fans remember the 18-16 game pretty well, and the how the Chiefs? I think he must have been. I can't remember his number. Oh, he had pretty good numbers in the opener that year too when they got crushed. It was not the same season when they got crushed at Pittsburgh, like 43.
There was a game or two where he just murdered them.
And what's funny is, to your point earlier, Sam, what I really remember the most is basically almost standing still at times in the backfield, like, oh, there's the hole, and then going. It's uncanny.
Yeah, and you can do that behind that Steelers line that they had a few years ago, but not. I don't know that you're doing that behind these guys.
What I remember is in the playoffs after the 2016 season, when the Steelers lost, or the Chiefs lost to the Steelers, Bell had a monster game. Right, they didn't get in the end zone, kicked the 6 field goals, but Bell dominated the game, and then the Steelers and the Chiefs played in the regular season kind of early before the midseason the following year, and Bell had the exact same game. And I'm just thinking the Chiefs didn't get any better. I mean, the Chiefs aren't going to beat the Steelers this year either. So I think he had 170 yards rushing in one game and 163 in another. Those are the 4th and 5th best rushing total games in his career were against the Chiefs, in that playoff game and then that regular season game.
Wow.
So I don't know. The Chiefs obviously feel like the running game isn't coming along the way that they had hoped it would, especially after the first, that Texans game where Clyde Edwards-Helaire had his 138 yards and things just looked, fantastic. And but this is also a team that, look what they did last year when they went out and signed guys during the season and how well that worked out for the Chiefs. I kind of trust Brett Veach here to know what he's doing, and Andy Reid to figure out a way to maximize the talents of Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, and not just that, but whatever he has left, the Chiefs are going to get the best of that. You know what I mean? Like, this guy feels, and I would think justifiably, but people can disagree, mistreated, misused, disrespected, all these things from his time with the Jets and Adam Gase. He's made that clear. So now if he comes here and stinks, then Adam Gase was right. And what happened with the Jets is his reality going forward. But if he comes here and is a good teammate and makes plays and has a positive impact, that's a hell of a platform to be on, the Super Bowl favorites and to be able to do that, and then go get a, somewhat big contract somewhere else. I mean, this is whatever he's got left, the Chiefs are going to get the best of it. And I think that's an important thing as well.
He could have gone to Buffalo and gone with, they're a winner, right? The Bills are a winner. They're a playoff team, have been 2 of the past 3 years and building towards something nice. The Dolphins seem to have a pretty nice future, could have been part of that, but he did choose to come here. And I think the finances would have been the same everywhere, just, some similar. We don't know that for sure, but he did choose to come to Kansas City. And I enjoyed the little social media exchange between he and Chris Jones yesterday. Did you guys check that?
I didn't see it.
I just saw the first one that Chris Jones planted about 30 seconds after he got cut.
Well, they apparently share the same agent, and that was just, come on, Kansas City, just basically recruiting him a little bit. I thought it was interesting.
How much do you think lead recruiter Patrick Mahomes got involved, despite his no, not necessarily tell on the call yesterday?
Right. Well, we know he got involved with the most recent running back that the Chiefs acquired, right? The first-round draft pick, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Do we think it's to the point where conversations happen between Patrick and Brett Veach about a move like this?
I always assume that stuff happens. I can tell you what didn't happen is that Andy Reid just didn't sit in his office and be like, Brett will handle that. Like, wait, he'll let me know. That's not at all.
I don't get that to you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what happened last week before we move on to the Bills. And let's look at both sides of the ball. Sam Mcdowell, you had a good story this morning about Patrick Mahomes, the offense, the passing game, what maybe ways to what kind of adjustments we might see in the production of the passing game. And it's not it's look, the Chiefs scored 32 points. They passed for over 300 yards. They put up some numbers, but this was a game last week where, and I think we all were saying it during the game, it reminded us of the 2018 Chiefs where they had to outscore teams to win. And that's the way that Sunday's game against the Raiders unfolded, and the Chiefs weren't able to outscore the Raiders. So what did you discover this week, Sam, about Patrick Mahomes and the offense?
Blair, you made a good point, I think it was the post-game call on Sunday, that even though they scored 32 points, there were back-to-back drives in that second half where they did absolutely nothing that sort of flipped the game there in the Raiders' favor permanently, as it turned out. And it was because Patrick Mahomes was sort of running for his life the entire second half. And so just tried to get to the root of that. And it turns out everybody wants to take responsibility for it, at least partially. But when you go back and watch the game, everybody does have a hand in this. You know, the offensive line didn't play well. They got 3 holding penalties, although looking back, the Mitchell Schwartz holding penalty was a pretty egregious call. But they also gave up 3 sacks. And then there's plays where Patrick Mahomes just leaves the pocket before he needs to leave the pocket. There's times where he drops back too far. And to me, that shows a lack of confidence in his offensive line. And maybe you can say, well, he played behind these guys in the first half. He had a reason not to be super confident in his offensive line. But for the plays to work as called, he's got to stay in the pocket for as long as he can, or at least try and step up rather than completely bail on the play. But Patrick Mahomes is a wizard with the off-script plays, but they can't solely rely on that way to move the football all the time.
Yeah, this is something, Sam, that I think you saw live. I thought watching the game live, I thought Mahomes was pretty good in the pocket, that he was only breaking when he needed to. But watching again, that was dead wrong. You guys were right. I looked at Pro Football Focus, and these things are subjective, right? But I think they had the Chiefs for 22 pressures given up, and they put 12 of them on the quarterback.
9. They put 9 on Mahomes.
Oh, 9. Okay.
But what's interesting about that is no other quarterback in the league last week got more than 5 charged to him, and only 2 guys were at that. It was Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert. So that puts in perspective. 9 is a really large number.
Yeah.
And Patrick Mahomes had only had 13 charged to him in the first 4 weeks, and then he had 9 in week 5. So maybe you look at that and say, well, it's good news. This hasn't been a recurring theme this season, because we did talk about this at one point last year.
For sure.
But on the other hand, something prompted him to feel the need to do that in week 5.
I go back to the third snap of the game, and Mahomes steps up in the pocket and throws the touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill. And I just wonder how differently the game would have unfolded and how Mahomes' game would have changed if that play had stood. I mean, that was an amazing play. An amazing play.
Perfect. That ball, that was like 65 yards in the air, right?
On a dime. Yeah.
Just exactly where it needed it. That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that play and some of the other stuff that went on in the first half that led to them having to settle for field goals. I know we talked about this a little bit after the game, but they lost fair and square. But I also think some things that could go the other way just didn't, and it's one of the reasons I'm less than concerned about their future. I do think that the offensive line play, defensive line play was a point of concern, but I do think things could have just as easily gone the other way a little bit with a little twist of fate.
And look, the bigger issue last weekend was the defense anyway. So let's spend a couple minutes talking about that. I find myself wondering, do I trust this defense now? And after seeing what I saw on Sunday, and Derek Carr and Ruggs and those guys just toast the Chiefs, it was kind of unnerving to see after what you had noticed about this defense in the previous few games. So look, they're facing an offense that got shut down last week, Buffalo's at Tennessee. But man, Josh Allen is terrific. Stephon Diggs. I mean, this is a team that's moving the ball, scoring, and having a lot of success. So what can we say about this defense that given a performance that we had not seen this season. Is this cause for alarm? Vahe, what do you think?
Well, my first thought is a little bit. I do wonder if they got out schemed or just fooled a little bit. I haven't looked explicitly back at play-by-play or the video, but it seems to me that the Raiders sort of played a little rope-a-dope. They were able to set them up early with a little intermediate game and runs, and then exploit the deep game in ways that the Chiefs didn't seem prepared for, one way or another, whether it was Ruggs' speed or the patterns themselves or breakdowns in communication in the secondary. I believe that those are fixable things, but I also wonder how they got so exploited. And that's to me unclear to me after this. So your point is a very valid question, Blair. I don't know if that's a indication that they're vulnerable completely there.
Yeah, and when you talk about fixing things, one thing that has to happen, they got to get a little more pressure on Allen than they did on Derek Carr. That was just I hadn't seen a more ineffective pass rush game by the Chiefs this year than in that game. Chris Jones just couldn't get there, and Frank Clark couldn't get there either. So maybe that'll change. Although Allen hasn't been sacked a lot this year, but give Derek Carr with time was able to pick apart the Chiefs last week, and that's just something we just don't see from Raiders teams and Derek Carr. And again, in Buffalo, a team that had handled the Raiders in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, they step up in class a little bit this week. So that's another issue, though. Chiefs coming off a loss. I think they have the full attention of coaches this week. We'll get to talk to coordinators later today, but just in terms of letting a loss beat you twice, sort of that old sports cliche, from a preparation standpoint, don't you guys think that the Chiefs will be, if they lose on Monday, it won't be because they let there was some leftover malaise from the Raiders game?
I think we're going to see close to the best that the Chiefs have on Monday. I really do. I think that this is a group that responds to certain moments. The most obvious example of that is the Ravens game. And, if you remember what the talk was before that game and the way that the players reacted after the game, I think they're going to have some of that in this. I also think that, I'm obviously not an NFL coach or whatever, but I think it's a good matchup for the Chiefs. I think that the Bills have struggled getting pressure on the quarterback.
Right.
And I think that they're going to try to blitz, to create some pressure. We know what happens there. Tre'Davious White is fantastic, a hell of a player, but has also been dealing with a back injury. I'm not sure what their injury report says, but if he plays, it'll be with, carrying a back injury. And I also think the defense has a lot of pride, and they know what happened, and they're going to try and fix that. Because it's all, I think, fixable stuff. That was scheme stuff. Travarius Ward does not need to be on an island against Henry Ruggs. And, Nelson Aguilar got Tyrann Mathieu to turn his hips the wrong way. And then he did the post instead of the corner. And, there are little things like that turn into big things, like 70-yard touchdowns. But I see these things as imminently fixable, and the Chiefs is sort of like the prideful, talented, ambitious group that's going to get this thing fixed in a big way.
The unusual thing about Sunday was they got beat in their best spots. The defensive line is one of the strengths of their defense, and the defensive line got beat. And I know that that's not a good thing, but it's also probably a sign that, like Sam said, it's fixable, because you still have Frank Clark and Chris Jones up front, and then their secondary as well. Their secondary has been great since about the middle part of last year, and a lot of it has been scheme. They've had rookies, they've had to rotate fresh bodies in there, and their secondary has still been sound. So just one game doesn't cause me a lot of alarm, but putting pressure on this quarterback is really important, because Josh Allen does not like to take sacks, and he dislikes it so much that he makes some weird plays just to try and avoid sacks. He'll throw the ball up. We've seen Twice this year, he's tried to lateral the ball in a really weird spot just to avoid a sack. We saw him do that last year against the Texans in the playoffs as well. This is a guy that it's really important to get some pressure on Josh Allen.
He also pulls it down and runs.
He does.
So he's got 3 rushing touchdowns. Leads the Bills in touchdowns this year and over 100 yards rushing. Terrence Warno Robinson says Chiefs can handle Diggs. He's not a speedster, but watch out for John Brown. Absolutely, John Brown, the old Pittsburgh State wide receiver, is a weapon for the Bills as well. So, okay, guys, let's. We really are missing Herbie Teope today. He's having some technical difficulties, and it can't be with us. We do miss you, Herbie, but through the wonders of technology, Herbie will be able to have a presence here today. Our producer Beth Welsh has something lined up, and we'll show that in just a second. But listen, we're going to switch to a segment we call Candy Corn, and I get asked all the time, why do you call this Candy Corn? And has to do with we just asked the guys a question about that's non-football related, and we try to discover a little bit more about Vahe, Sam, and Herbie and myself. And it kind of started a year ago. And when we were on a SportsBeat Live, we were at a tire store, and the question was asked, what's your favorite Halloween candy? And Beth, if we're ready, this was the response.
Candy corn. You can't go wrong.
Oh, my God. Dear God. What? Can we be shut down?
Oh, that is so well done. That is so well done.
That's everything I hoped it would be.
Oh, man.
With that element of horror movie.
So kudos to Neil Nakahoto for putting that together for us. And I think we need to make that a weekly staple.
This show belongs on TV now. I mean, that was so well done.
Terrific. So candy corn was the answer that day. Favorite Halloween candy that brought that kind of response. So the question today, I try to find a kind of a current topic to ask these guys, and it's and sometimes the topics are sad. Like this week, the passing of Joe Morgan, the great Cincinnati Reds second baseman. Man, that guy was a great ball player, and it just. A line of Hall of Fame players have passed away this year. Tom Seaver, Lou Brock, Bob Gibson, Al Kaline. It's just been a kind of a sad year for baseball in that way, but it also has allowed people to remember what they loved about the sport growing up. And some of these guys that I talked about were favorite ball players of people. I know people my age that were just huge Tom Seaver fans. They're all-time favorite player. And Vahe, you spent as much time as you did in St. Louis. I mean, how big were Bob Gibson and Lou Brock to Cardinals fans in St. Louis? I mean,
absolutely. I mean, just, icons forever, right?
Right. So I asked the guys to think about their first sports star, athlete star or hero, and go back to their youth. And Vahe, since you're on the big screen, and yours is the one there's a little bit of mystery about, tell us who your first favorite athlete was.
Okay, so I'm going to set it up real quick with the first name I ever knew was Willie Mays, because we lived in the Bay Area and an uncle of mine took us to Candlestick Park for a game. I think I fell asleep, though. I had no real impression. Then we moved to Texas. And
wasn't impressive. He was okay.
He was okay. I have high standards. Then we moved to Texas, and the first college football game I ever went to was Longhorns.
Hook 'em.
Jim Bertelsen was my guy, but that was just kind of fleeting. And by the time we moved to Philadelphia, there was this guy, Mike Schmidt. He was coming along, but really the answer is Bobby Clark and the Ferocious Flyers.
How about that?
A good one.
Yeah, he was. They really captured the imagination. Remember, this was a time in Philadelphia where like the Sixers were 9-73, the Eagles were 4-10, the Phillies were losing 95 games, but then there were the Flyers. So Bobby Clark. He
was back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, right? 74, 75. Brian Johnson weighs in. O.J. Simpson when he was with the Bills. All right, Sam Ellinger. Well, we know yours.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. Yeah, but let's remind everybody. Here it is.
Yeah, when you said like we learned something new about us when we did the segment, I was like, Bo Jackson was a superhero, like an absolute superhero. Like to play two sports, it just like blew my mind, and I was at the perfect age. And but I literally like I don't think this is like hyperbole. Like I think that I was going to be a sports fan anyway, but I think he put that in overdrive because it was just this sense of wonder and this sense of like pushing boundaries of what's possible. I mean, it just like literally, this is so stupid. I'm a grown man. I have kids and a mortgage, but I just got chills like talking about like what I thought of Bo Jackson when I was a kid. Like literally, I just got chills going up my back. It's just unbelievable. First, last, and only favorite athlete for me.
How did you reconcile his Raiders career?
It was fine. I mean, he ran over Brian Bosworth. Like I was,
you're good with that.
That was amazing. Yeah.
All right. And look, these answers also reflect our generation as well, don't they?
Yeah.
So you were that was right in your wheelhouse as a impressionable kid, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was like 8 years old or whatever. Like in '87 when he first came up, and then he had '89 with the All-Star game, the home run and the stolen base with Ronald Reagan in the booth, and that was the same year I think that he ran over Bosworth, the Monday night game. That was like one of the first things I can remember, sneaking out of my room to like the guest room that had the TV upstairs to watch that game. And I remember my dad like coming down and catching me and like not being that mad. It was like, okay, fine. It was everything to me, man. Just absolutely everything.
Dads understand.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Sam McDowell, what do you got?
My first and only favorite athlete ever is Ozzie Smith. I grew up playing baseball, grew up playing shortstop, couldn't hit much, but I always thought at least that I was really good with the glove. And man, that guy could do just unbelievable things on defense. So, I went to spring training when I was probably like 11. And to see him take infield, there was all that conversation back in the 90s about seeing Sosa and McGuire. You had to get there and watch him take batting practice. For me, I had to get there and watch Ozzie take infield because it was just incredible to me. So he always been my favorite athlete. I still have a poster in my basement that's the Wizard. I mean, he still to this day has sort of an impression on me.
I think he was with the Padres when he made that play where the ball skips a different. Yeah, the ball skips another direction. He catches the barehand. That was amazing.
That was one of the very first videos I had as a kid was a This Week in Baseball video that I played on loop, and he was interviewed on that, and he was talking about the fact that he'd heard people the next morning talk about it was the greatest play he'd ever seen, and he was like shocked by it. He just kind of shrugged it off like
it was just a Tuesday.
Ball hit a rock. Ball hit a rock. I put my hand up. What am I supposed to do?
This is like a random and kind of irrelevant thing about Ozzie Smith, though, too. Like he played in a golf tournament here, like 10 years ago, and however many years after he retired that was, and he looked exactly the same. Like he looked like he could hit second, for the Cardinals. Like in that moment, it's unbelievable.
David Van Zandt, Bo Jackson was Patrick-like. I kind of see that. Just doing things that you haven't seen anybody else do.
Yeah.
Stephen Fisher, Derek Thomas, growing up in Kansas City. Absolutely, I get that for sure. Herbie, who can't be with us, let us know that his favorite, interesting call, Fernando Valenzuela, the left-handed pitcher for the Dodgers, who I was enamored with that guy in that spurt that he had of success in '81, which was the strike-shortened year that did the two halves of a baseball season. I remember Fernando basically getting the Dodgers to the postseason, and it was another Dodgers-Yankees World Series. We'd already seen a couple of them. Royals fans certainly know all about that because the Yankees had to beat the Royals to get to the World Series in '78 and 77 and '78, and the Yankees went through them. But because of Fernando, the Dodgers ended up winning that World Series in '81, and he was just a phenomenon. Just that. This was he pitched at a time when they had the center field camera, and his balls were doing things that I hadn't seen a pitcher do. That screwball thing he had. Yeah, it was going the other way, away. It was really bizarre. So good call by.
It's interesting that Herbie picked an athlete from when he was in his 30s.
He doesn't mean it, Herbie. Well, in mine, Sam Mcdowell, he nailed it last night. Mine is and always has been Roberto Clemente. I was born in Pittsburgh, PA, and only lived there until I was 6, but that was long enough to understand what he was, and it was in the 1960s. This was a time in Pittsburgh when the Pirates were more popular than the Steelers. So the Pirates were winning throughout the 60s, and the Steelers were terrible. And Roberto Clemente was just godlike to me and to a legion of fans when we were young. And I certainly had a big Roberto Clemente poster up in my room, and I couldn't hit like him, but I did try to wear number 21 when I could. And I always wanted to have a strong arm. That was it. I had to be able to throw the ball a distance from whatever outfield position I played, because that was Clemente's calling card, was his great arm. So good ones, you guys. Let's quickly go through a predicted score, winner and score, before we get out of here. So let's start with you, Vahe. What do you think is going to happen on Monday at the typical NFL kickoff time of Monday at 4 p.m. Central?
I think the Chiefs are going to be in the right frame of mind, and I think Chiefs at their best are pretty good, and I look at them to score 32. Actually, 31. It's hard to get to 32 to get that average, I think, even though they had it last week. It's 31 to 20 Chiefs.
Super Bowl score, 31 to 20. All right, Sam Mcdowell.
I think the Chiefs will win, but I do think it'll be close. I'm going to say 28-24. Sounds about right.
Okay. Sam Mellinger?
Yeah, I'm going to be extreme, and if this doesn't turn out, I'm going to look like a stupid homer. But I think it's going to be their best. I think for a lot of reasons. I'm thinking like 38-17, something like that.
That would be a statement. That would be a statement, wouldn't it? I mean, to the rest of the NFL. And look, if they get by this one, schedule kind of favorable the next few games, right? Broncos, Jets, Panthers.
Sure.
And then get this, my favorite game, Raiders off the bye. You don't think they're up for that one?
Well, off the bye as the schedule currently stands.
That's true. Yeah, that's
absolutely true. Absolutely true. So I'm going 31-27 Chiefs. What a homer group that we are. I mean, look, the Chiefs are a 3.5-point favorite in this game. I thought maybe somebody would take the Bills, but nope. I think we're all kind of on the same mindset. We've seen this team, respond to games like this. I don't think this is last year when the Chiefs followed their first loss, which was against the Colts, with another loss to the Texans, both at Arrowhead. Mahomes was hurt. They were Tyreek Hill was just coming back from an injury. It was a different Chiefs team. I agree with you guys. I think they get things fixed for Monday late afternoon in Buffalo. So, hey, listen, great talking to you guys. Thanks so much for all your questions and comments. We got a bunch of them. Brian Johnson says 35-24 Chiefs. I think that was the AFC title game score. We'll be coming at you after the Bills game, probably in between an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes after the Monday game with the Bills. Please join us. Please join us then. And for Sam Vahe, Sam, and Herbie T.O.P., and our producer, Beth Welsh, so long. Good morning. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.